And now we have Lindsay Huddleston from Students First.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, and to all members. Thank you for having me.
If you press the button.
Oh, could you put, thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, again, thank you for having all of my educational colleagues here, and thank you for your service. I'd like to have a personal privilege to acknowledge my state rep, Representative Shore. Thank you for your leadership for my family and our district. And as a proud native Detroiter, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize Representative Santana, Representative Chang, for all you're doing in Detroit. I just want to be very brief and concise in the interest of time to give an overview of Students First, a little background about myself as a newly appointed state director, as well as letting you know some of our legislative priorities here. I'm joined by team members, former state rep Deb Shaughnessy, who acts as our outreach director, really having strong ties west of Lansing. Brian Love is here as well as another outreach director, doing a lot of great work on that education coalition that Representative Chang referenced. We're also joined by some of our volunteers, Mr. Al Calderon, who's been doing a great job for socioeconomic justice in Grand Rapids, and I thank you for that. And also a gentleman who's kind of new to the political scene, Larry Meyer. I'd like to thank Larry for all his work he's doing here in the greater Lansing area. Just briefly about myself. As stated, I'm a very proud native Detroiter. I came to Lansing about 10 some odd years ago to be in the Grand Home Administration. My first career out of high school was returning to my old high school as a teacher and a coach. So you can imagine the stories. And worked with students with the Wayne County Juvenile Detention Facility, was able to do a spectrum shift and then travel the country and Canada as a motivational speaker, and later returned to politics by getting involved with the Grand Home Administration, first as her advanced lead, then as a law clerk in her legal division, and finishing as her her deputy director for legislative affairs here in Lansing. I was recruited by a small company out of Arkansas called Walmart, and they brought me on as a senior manager for public affairs and government relations, handling issues in both Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. After my daughter was born, as all the parents know, everything changes. And I looked at consulting in the field of politics and education even still. And from that point, was able to transition as a new state director as just a few weeks ago. Just to talk about Students First, I want to talk about our great leader, Michelle Rhee. 3 years ago, after leaving the chancellorship of Washington, D.C. public schools, she went on the Oprah Winfrey Show and talked about all the offers she received to become superintendent of schools in different districts and how she wanted to have a larger impact. So with that, she started Students First and had a goal of raising $1 billion and having 1 million people sign up. And since then, as we still work towards that goal, we're working to evolve and reconnect with many of the people we started to communicate with a few years ago, and that's what our team is doing. I'm sorry, I forgot one team member, Jenna Stevens. I was feeling the heat from behind me. Jenna, thank you for your involvement too. Jenna is our outreach coordinator and fundraising coordinator. Did not mean to forget you. They just came back to me in time. Thank goodness. Okay. But basically what our priorities are right now, we are really focused on teacher evaluation. I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with that. Getting information of what took place during the lame duck session. We're hoping that going forward, along with the Senate, we'll be able to put together a quality teacher evaluation bill that can have a great impact on Michigan. Third grade reading, as everyone knows, is very important. By the third grade, you're either learning to read or reading to learn, and that's very significant, especially as it relates to the almost inappropriate test scores that have come out throughout the state of Michigan. And the A through F letter grading, we have been communicating with the Michigan Department of Education. They seem to be the good conversationalists right now, and Ben is my friend, and you're doing a great job, Ben. And we just look forward to seeing the transition that comes with that. So with that, I just wanted to introduce myself and say that I'm really looking forward to working with everyone here, and also just to recognize that we are at a very historic moment, ladies and gentlemen, here in Michigan. We have a Republican House, Senate, and governor, so believe me, all eyes will be on Michigan and what we can accomplish. And my expectation is everyone here should have some emotional investment. I would be disappointed if we're not emotionally invested in the future of our young people and also the future of this great country. So I expect that even if we don't agree on issues, that we agree that we must move towards education reform, and somehow, some way, we'll be able to work things out, because all eyes are on us. And when they look back on history, people will say that the educational leaders in Michigan did the right thing for our future generations. So with that, I'll be willing to answer any easy questions that you have and go from there. So thank you.
I'm sure Representative Zemke will ask you an easy question.
Okay, great.
I'll be
great.
very nice to you, Lindsay, I promise.
Thank you.
I was curious. I know that you're new, so I don't want to go. I won't ask you any in-depth questions about policies that we worked on last term. That being the case, you're very familiar with this coalition. In fact, I know Brian Love, who works for you, also participates in a lot of educational activities outside of Students First in Detroit. Sits on a portion of that coalition.
Right.
What do you expect in terms of some of the innovative, creative ideas that could come from that? How would you ask us to look at those? You know, how can we be supportive of some things that have some that really are driven by Detroiters for their community?
Sure. I really appreciate that question. I think your question gives way to my answer is that you have a great representation in that coalition that Brian is serving on and you're involved in as well. And recognize the fact that these are Detroiters with Detroit's best interest in mind. So their recommendations will be for the heart of Detroiters. And I think that should be taken into account. I think you wouldn't expect anyone to come into your district from outside the district and tell you what your priorities should be. And I think there should be a respectful response and receptiveness to what's going to be coming out of that coalition and really support them going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Shore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, let me compliment Students First, because I have not seen another organization in this town that is actually on the ground doing things. Seeing Brian Love and seeing Jenna with 25 football players at Lansing Sexton cleaning up outside was truly impressive this summer. So
thank you.
I will compliment your organization. Now, knowing that you're just on early, one of the things that I want to get into your list of thoughts, we worked with Students First a little bit last year in the A to F bill, but part of it was talking about the priority schools and how you get into the priority schools, and there's a way in now, and there was a second way we were looking to get in through Representative Lyons' bill. And Students First was very helpful in a lot of those discussions. You know, at the time I indicated I wasn't interested in having 2 or 3 different ways to get in, but I do think we need to decide, is the way that schools get onto that priority list now appropriate? Should we be looking at other ways? There were some ideas that your folks brought to the table, and I hope we can continue to have that conversation, because while I don't believe that we should have 3 different ways to go in, we do need to figure out, is it working now, or are there better ways and more effective ways to look at our schools? Do they need to be on that priority list or not? So I hope that will be part of your continual dialogue moving forward, and I look forward to working with you and your staff on that.
Sure, sure. And if I could just respond to that, and Representative Craig referenced that also. A to F is very difficult. We're trying to get to a simplistic system, but trying to crush a lot of data into one thing. But I think it speaks to a larger issue that we're facing here in education, is that we can no longer respond to things with 140 characters as an answer. My experience supporting the governor as her deputy for legislative affairs, I realized that you all have a very unique role. You come here and you're inundated with all this great data and all this information, and you have the tough job of translating that to Joe Public when you go back to your district. And it's not that Joe Public isn't, a concerned citizen, but it's really tough to take all this information and process that down to bite-sized chunks. So I challenge us to continue to have sophisticated, high-level conversations, and I think we have to take into account all those other intricacies that you referenced and just be willing to realize that it's not going to be easy to get where we need to get, but it's going to take some high-level conversation and some giving and taking to get to that point. But I agree with you. There are a lot of things that need to go into that, but as long as we're willing to have some high-level discussions about it, I think we'll be able to be on the right track and be successful.
Thank you. Representative McBroom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, you know that your group being a little bit different structure than some of the previous groups that came up to talk, I guess I'd like to try and ask the question maybe framed a little differently, and that's how can your organization, do you have recommendations, I guess, that you're seeing around the country where you work with other state boards of education and other state departments of education? How could we do a better job here in Michigan having interaction between our local schools and the Department of Education? Sure.
Somehow the Department of Education has stayed top of mind. We just recently met with the Department of Education, one of their able-bodied deputies, and the role I'm taking as the new leader here in Michigan is that recognizing that there's going to be a transition. Mike Flanagan, who was a friend of mine from the governor's administration, is going out to pastor. I say that as a joke to him. He's a friend of mine, I can say that. But I think right now, Representative, we just have to kind of walk through this transition and hope that after this happens, we can establish probably some new structures as far as how we're going to address things, and recognize that there's probably a lot of legislative hangover from what may have happened prior to the transition, and just really be open to having a fresh new start, because I really don't want to carry any baggage into a new conversation with a new transition. So at this point, I'm just trying to be wide open, familiar with what happened in the past, but not so much caught up on that as far as the new decisions we make trying to work together. I hope that helps you with the answer.
Well, maybe you could tell us, is there another state that you're familiar with where you feel the relationship is better, where there's more assistance provided?
Well, very good question. I immediately started thinking about some of our states in the Southern Belt, Georgia and Pennsylvania, going back north. And not saying that it's a better relationship. However, in those states, we've been a little bit more creative in how we would get to where we needed to go. And sometimes we usurp the legislature appropriately, but going through some administrative processes. So I don't necessarily point out a state that may be better to deal with, but I do know that there have been some creative things that we've done to still get to the end result. And at the end of the day, whether it's a barrier in front of us, we're going to do whatever it takes to get around that for the sake of putting students first. So I don't have a particular state I can point to. I'm just really Michigan focused right now, but there has been some creative things done in other states to get to the end result.
Thank you. And, well, those who have testified, appreciate your cards, but seeing no further business before the committee, we are adjourned.
Thank you.